What is going on, guys? Welcome to another episode of the Masculine Health Solutions Podcast. We talk about everything in regards to men's health and being the best possible version of ourselves, whether it's male enhancement, physical development, muscular development, all that good stuff. And I'm your host, CJ Rodriguez. Fat loss coach is what I love to do. Getting people into the best possible shape of their lives is my passion, and my passion is basically translated into this podcast as well. And this is why I'm always looking into different things that can make us better as men, as people, as humans. Anybody can really listen to this and take a lot of the positive things out of this podcast, except for the male enhancement. You got to be a guy. I'm sorry. But regardless of whether, you're just looking to improve yourself as a man or just have better health, whatever the case may be, this next subject is important for absolutely all of us. And the reason I say that is that, unfortunately, in this day and age, a lot of people just aren't doing this anymore. And it's a superpower that the body has, right? A superpower the body has that we just don't utilize. And the question now becomes why? And Justin Glaser, the author of Sweat, a groundbreaking book on sweat's wildly underappreciated role in health, vitality, and disease prevention, is here to talk about exactly that. He is the author behind Sweat, Uncovering the Body's Hidden Superpower. And today, he blew my mind with so many different things in regards to what sweat really does and the capacity that it has to help us, and to detoxify and make sure that we're feeling healthy, which is something that, unfortunately, in this day and age, and this is kind of the main reason why I started this podcast, is, like I said before, I'm looking for solutions. I'm looking for ways that we can make ourselves better. And sweat, man, is honestly super underappreciated. It's the body's natural way of detoxifying. It's the body's natural way of getting rid of bad shit from your body. And for some reason, we just don't sweat enough, right? And if you look across all the different civilizations that have existed on this planet, they all utilize this very, very powerful tool that the body has in different ways, in a myriad of ways, right? And the beauty of it is that he breaks down all the wonderful intricacies of how this process works, along with all the different things that, and the different ways that you can go about doing it, right? And, he also sheds light on some of the things that, like you see these portable like saunas and stuff. And he talks about why some of them might not be as good as you may think and may actually, unfortunately, be releasing some of the things you don't want into your body because of the way they're constructed, right? So he really got into like the nitty gritty, talked about how we can basically make our lives better, sweat more, and the best ways to go about it. And be sure to check out his book. The link is in the description, right? The link is in the description. Be sure to check it out. Give the book a read. A lot of fascinating things that he reveals in the book, right? And honestly, we just kind of scratched on the surface. There's so much more that he got into in detail in regards to in the book itself, right? So I definitely would advise that you check it out. And if you want to learn more about Justin, be sure to click on any of the links in the description as well. I got all the stuff there if you want to follow him on IG and all that good stuff. So that being said, let's jump on into today's episode of the Masculine Health Solutions Podcast with Justin Glaser, and where we talk about sweat, uncovering your body's hidden superpower. Before we get started, one more thing. If you want to get any PE gear, be sure to check out TotalManShop.com. That is TotalManShop.com. And use the promo code MHS2020. Promo code is MHS2020 and get 12% off. Be sure to check out their wide variety of all kinds of good quality PE equipment. All right? And that's promo code MHS2020 for 12% off. And the website, once again, is TotalManShop.com. What is going on, guys? Welcome to another episode of the Masculine Health Solutions Podcast, where I am joined by Justin Glaser, who's going to tell us a little bit about sweat and how important it is when it comes to living healthy lives and its relevance to obviously making us healthier. But first and foremost, how are you today, Justin?
I'm good. Thank you, CJ.
No, and I mean, I was looking forward to this conversation because it's something that I do feel that, and for myself, and I know you live in New York as well. When you live in these colder places, it seems like we are not sweating enough. But where did this story and where did this breakthrough really come through for you in your life? And what is it that led you to basically going down and mastering the subject?
Yeah, I mean, cold places for sure. I think, and my book kind of argues that all of us aren't sweating enough, and so I go into great detail on that. I'm 28 years old. I live in New York. When I was in college, I went to a school in the Midwest in Michigan, and by the time I graduated college, I was kind of having a bit of a health crisis where I was experiencing fatigue, brain fog, mental clarity issues, automatic negative thoughts, and just really feeling like if I didn't solve that host of symptoms, my life would not go the way I wanted it to go. And it wasn't something that anyone who met me would say you need to go to a hospital or like you're in trouble. But I just felt intuitively that I wasn't where I could be, and there was something missing. I look at like old pictures of myself as a kid and be like, there's a spark there that I feel like, what happened? Why did that disappear? Is it my head? Is it my nutrition? What's going on? And so I became obsessed with figuring out why that was happening and solving it for myself. In that process, I went to Western doctors, Eastern doctors, everything from blood tests, genetic tests to nutrition, Reiki, acupuncture. I tried everything under the sun, meditation, psychotherapy, like just everything. And that was like a 2-year period of just searching and becoming obsessed with figuring out what was going on. Even with that limited energy, I became obsessed because it really felt like do or die in my brain.
Yeah.
Um, in that process, I was recommended to go try a sauna just from a friend, I think. Went in for 30 minutes in a place in the city, got out after sweating a lot, took a shower and felt better than I'd felt from all the other stuff combined. I didn't know why. And so that gave me like a taste of how much better I could feel. And I just had no clue what was causing that reaction for me. Um, and so I became a regular sauna user over the course of about that year and have been ever since. But during that year, I steadily improved my symptoms from feeling kind of terrible to decent to kind of, I don't want to say super normal, but like peak. Like I felt like I was a kid again. And so this book has been on my mind for a while from what I learned from this process. And what I experienced is not unique to me. Thousands of people have experienced these benefits. And I finally kind of collated all these ideas to put together this thesis for why it was so beneficial for me and why it's so important now in the modern world for people to be doing this for their health and disease prevention. And so this year I decided to kind of put all these ideas that I've gathered through this ridiculous labyrinth of searching
Yeah.
into this book. And so I released it on November 15th. It's been out since then.
That's super interesting. And again, it's one of these things that happens to I think a lot of us in life. It just when we experience enough pain, it usually motivates us to start searching. You said it was a
Yep.
labyrinth, but you still figure out a way to get out of that labyrinth and finally find that light that said, hey, this is the best way, this is the way out of here, this is how you do it. And it's interesting because everybody I feel has different struggles, and usually it's pain that spurs us into figuring out how to figure out what's going wrong with us, right?
Yeah, it's a prerequisite. I mean, it's kind of like I think of it like if you have a little bouncy ball and you kind of drop it, it's not going to bounce much. But if you smack it, it's going to shoot up. And
Yeah.
there's a term I recently came across called region beta paradox, which kind of is the same thing. Like if you're in kind of a gray zone, let's say you're in this apartment and there's like a little smell, but you don't know where it's coming from and you kind of ignore it for a few years,
Hmm.
versus you have a mold infestation and you frantically contact 10 other rental properties and you're out that week. Um, it's that extreme version that tends to propel us into action. So I didn't wish to go through that experience, but it certainly was the rocket fuel that allowed me to kind of go down those rabbit holes that otherwise I never would have.
I mean, it probably would have just remained dormant. To your point, right? It's if you don't really feel like it's that bad, you're not going to do a whole lot. Most of us
Mhm.
aren't. And I mean, I know exactly that feeling. It's complacency, right? And usually
Yeah,
complacency just kind of keeps us right where we're at. We're like, yeah, it's not too bad. It's not great, but it's not too bad. So I'll just kind of deal with it. But
yeah.
one of the biggest things that I took away from what you were saying there is that you felt you didn't have that spark. Could you go into a little bit more about what that really felt like? Was it just lethargy all day, brain fog? What did it really feel like when you felt like you just like, felt down?
Yeah, it felt like um there's a lot of brain fog. So just kind of sense of not being like sharp. I was always very good in school and I could get my work done and all of that, but it just felt slow and not like vital. Energy levels, I'd walk down the street in New York and I wouldn't enjoy going on walks because I did feel exhausting, even though I'm just walking. I'm not like an overweight guy or anything like that. It was just fatigue. So that kind of fed into motivation. And I explain in the book what caused it. It's really chemical toxin issue that we're all exposed to. So can I expand on that a little bit?
100%. Yeah, I wanted to get into that.
Yeah. So, I mean, experientially, it was just a sense of almost wearing sunglasses all the time. Like it was just my entire reality was filtered through that lens of just feeling sluggish and like there was a grayness to life. And that was just the kind of a reflection of what was going on inside. And ultimately kind of the thesis of the book and what I discovered is kind of when I started researching toxins for the book and kind of coming across some arguments for that, I thought it was kind of this fringe stuff like, oh, chemicals, toxins, is these crazy people who think that that's an issue. And then pretty quickly talking with people and reading and diving into the literature, it became clear that this is perhaps the number one issue in the modern world and is largely responsible for mental health epidemic, energy problems, disease, autoimmune issues, cancers. Not medical advice, but this is just what a lot of this literature was kind of linking this stuff to. And so it's okay, toxins is this issue that is everywhere. We're exposed to it in the air, in the paint on the walls. It's in the couches, the flame retardants, our clothing, the polyester, our food, our water supply. And so first you go, holy shit. Like I had no idea, I don't know if I can curse, but I had no idea that this was a factor because it's this invisible problem, right? And so unless you're dealing with what I was dealing with, you wouldn't even think to look for it. Or, you wake up and you're seemingly healthy and you get a cancer diagnosis or something like that. And there's other things that can cause that, but it's not like an intuitive thing to think about. So first kind of discovering that, okay, there's a big problem that I wasn't aware of, that even if you don't have symptoms, it's messing with your mood through the day. It's messing with your anxiety. It's messing with your energy levels to some degree. If you can't wake up and say, I'm at 100% for sure, part of the reason is going to be this toxin issue. And so it started with that. And then the literature showing that sweat is actually the best way to detoxify these substances. Stuff is coming out in sweat that your body isn't able to get out through the other detox pathways. And so, that's really the last 20 to 30 years of proving that. But on top of that, we have, this isn't some biohack, some new thing. Cultures around the world for centuries have used sauna and sweat lodge. And that's my first chapter, is talking about Russian banya, Native American sweat lodges, the Japanese using saunas, the Native Americans, the Peruvians, the Finnish, all over the world for centuries. These separate cultures have used these practices, and intuitively for purification, for rituals, for initiation rites. And now it's more important than ever because of this modern last 50 to 60 year issue of introducing 60,000 plus chemicals into the environment. And just we're living in a toxic soup, and that's just the reality. So I kind of paint that picture of much bigger problem than you think that's affecting everything in your life. And then a solution that's not some magic pill, but something that our body naturally does, that we have the tools now to kind of use to combat this. And then I go much deeper into those kind of two pieces of the puzzle.
It's crazy because, I mean, right off the top, when you mentioned that, the first thing I remember my dad telling me that when I was a kid was like, oh, no, yeah, in the Scandinavian countries, they're big into sauna, but we don't really need it. And I'm like, we live in Canada now. Like, I think we might, and I think there's a reason behind that. It's not so much that people just do it for fun. I think there were legit purposes behind it that maybe they didn't fully understand, but they probably felt really good. And they're just like, hey, you know what? I feel good. I'm detoxified. I feel like $1 million.
Yeah. And, back then there was obviously differences, right? So there was heavy metals that had been on the planet for a long time. So they were dealing with heavy metals in varying degrees, I'm sure. They probably couldn't clean their water as well as we can, though we still don't do a great job with that. So, they weren't dealing with forever chemicals, these man-made substances that mess with us in terrible ways, these endocrine disruptors and all of that. Yeah. But they certainly saw the benefits of it in it. And, not just some isolated, not just the Finnish, but practically every country on the planet had some sort of ritual around this.
Yeah. And I mean, if one of the things that I always look for is, And I learned this from like reading Weston A. Price's book many years ago, right? Where he was talking about why is it that all these cultures back in the day have great teeth? And he started
Mm,
studying the different habits that they would all employ. And it's like, well, they all ate according to like the longitude and latitude they were on. They ate seasonally, they would sweat, they would run, they were active, more than 20,000 steps a day. So
mm,
there's something to commonalities when you find it from well, I want to say ancient cultures, but older cultures that have been around for a couple of years, 300, 400 years. It's like when you find these patterns, it becomes kind of hard to deny, right? And it's interesting too, because your story, it's like your friend told you, like, you should just try this on. And then it opened up this massive, like, Pandora's box into, hey, you know what? There's a whole lot of reasoning behind it. But what was one of the most surprising things that you found from the sauna exposure for yourself?
Um, I think it finally solved the puzzle for me, which was, I think whether that's genetic or just my nutrition, or I was exposed to different levels of things. Maybe I painted garages one summer. Maybe I was exposed to a lot through that.
Mm-hmm.
Or, a combination of things. It wasn't very clear. I was dealing with a very high toxic load, and the sauna progressively allowed me to lower that to allow my body to naturally do what it does, which is function really well. So the argument is it's a really empowering philosophy, which is your body is meant to thrive. It's like this
Yeah.
thing has been built, like the amount of, it's humbling how much has to go into you working properly. And so getting the stuff out that interferes with that kind of allows the natural state to emerge, which is this, energized like a kid again kind of feeling, which is what
Mm-hmm.
I felt. And so it was really cool to go from like a 2 to 3 out of 10 feeling day to day to like an 8 to 10 out of 10 every day, and getting to experience that. And so, I just wanted to put this together so other people can have that experience, whether they're a 2 or a 6 out of 10. The,
Mm-hmm.
the, just the subjective change in your experience is so profound for people who do this. And I spoke with directly spoke with dozens of people, but I'm also in online communities during this process of thousands of people sharing their stories. In particular, there was one Facebook group with 50,000 members for a
Dang.
sauna protocol, and it's all people with different use cases. But I had fibromyalgia and went to 10 doctors, no one helped me, or I had cancer and nothing was working, and then or I had diabetes, just like everything under the sun, every problem. And the common thread being, try the traditional approaches, nothing worked. And then this online community was a resource for people to share what was working for them. But the group was based around sauna. And so I learned a lot from that group, just from that kind of hive mind of people figuring things out together.
Well, yeah, because you got that community where you guys can kind of just feed off of each other and say, hey, you know what? Like, no, I had this idea. And obviously, I'm guessing you guys probably implemented different things, like, I don't know, maybe fasting or, which is one that I'm big on, because I like fasting a lot for myself, because I just feel like I'm able to just process things. And I don't really feel like back in the day, everybody was eating as much as we are right now. And obviously, to the
100%.
point about like the toxins too, man, when I started reading about the toxins in my food, I'm like, this is really disheartening, because I'm like, it's everywhere. Everything's
Yeah.
wrapped up in plastic. It almost seems like there's no escape. But with the sauna, and obviously with fasting and maybe juice fasting and all that kind of stuff, you're able to actually transport that out of your body. But one question I had was, now that you've studied more of this, how does that detoxification really take place, like in the body? Like, what does that process look like? Does it just kind of like get dragged out of your pores and you leave it all there? Like, how does that happen?
Yeah, it's so a lot of these chemicals are going to be in your bloodstream.
Hmm.
And it seems to be that when your body has the opportunity to sweat, it will, some of this might be stored in fat. Well, we know it's stored in fat. It's called lipophilic chemicals. It's fat loving chemicals. And so some of that might be pushed out of the fat into the bloodstream to then be excreted through the sweat. Um, so, and then you're wiping it down. So you should have a towel and you should be constantly
Constantly.
taking this
Okay.
off of you. The studies prove, like, so one study was a researcher named Stephen Genui. I think it was 2010. He took 20 people into a sauna, tested their urine and blood for chemicals,
Wow.
and got a panel of what was in it, and then had them sit in a sauna. And once they were sweating heavily, scraped them and sampled the sweat to see what was in it. And they found substances in the sweat that weren't detected in the blood or urine, which signaled that a lot of this stuff was being stored until the body found an opportunity to release it, and that a lot of these chemicals are preferentially excreted through the sweat. And so that was kind of kind of a landmark kind of study that helped prove what a lot of people intuitively knew, which is that this stuff is hard to get out, and sweat is this kind of secret weapon to do so.
Interesting. Because I mean, I'd heard about the toxins being stored in fat, right? It's kind of like one of the benefits from losing weight, losing fat is obviously you get rid of all these toxins as well.
Well, yes and no. So I mean, there is that argument, which is these lipophilic uh, toxins, let's call them, store in the fat. But when you're burning the fat, then it gets released into the bloodstream. And the
Oh,
argument is that can signal you to crave more food, to put on more fat, to then harbor those toxins. So a lot of people go through this protocol called the niacin sauna protocol, which is kind of the culmination of my book, which is this miraculous detox protocol that involves taking it's niacin, which is a vitamin B that induces something called lipolysis. Not to get too technical, but lipolysis essentially opens your fat cells, and your fat cells are storing a lot of these lipophilic toxins. And so it opens these fat cells, allows toxins to go into the bloodstream, and then allows you to sweat it out. And so it's a much deeper detox. Sauna on its own is great, but this is like years of stored toxins being released. And you better make sure you're sweating, because otherwise it's circulating and it'll cause what's called a Herxheimer reaction. But I cite some amazing examples. So, toxicity is kind of the scale, right? So if you think of an extreme example, would be 9/11 victims, right? So they're exposed to the towers coming down, inhaling plumes of chemicals, thousands of people unable to go to work, tremors, chronic fatigue, neurological issues. And they tried a bunch of different things, inhalers, all these sorts of kind of common sense attempts to improve their symptoms, nothing working. And they put an initial cohort of 500 people through that niacin sauna program for 30 days. All 500 got better. IQ tests before and after, cognitive improvement, postural sway tests, their balance got better. They were able to go back to work. I think 87%, I believe is the number, were able to get off their medications. And so it makes a lot of sense to me now, but it's not the first logical thought. But once you put two and two together, which is you need to get these substances out of your body, and sweat's the best way to do it. And niacin kind of takes it to another level in terms of releasing from the fat cells, where it's like deeply stored. It's quite profound. And so that protocol has actually been used by veterans, exposure to like heavy metals and things like that. Agent Orange victims, I think that's from Vietnam, Gulf War oil spills, drug rehabs. So it's this really powerful protocol that's been underappreciated. And so I kind of finished the book with that. I don't recommend anyone do that on their own. I think you should work with a coach to do it. But it is something I'm passionate about talking about, because it's like, it's kind of like the crescendo of all these ideas kind of coming to the top.
Yeah, man. I mean, that sounds like it's like a deep cleaning or something. Like, I mean, as soon as you said that, I was like, what? I'm like, just niacin, and it's like, that sounds intense. Because you're right. I mean, it's almost like you got to get in there and scrape all this shit that we've just been accumulating for years. Like, that's the worst part about it. It's like, man, like, see, I thought you just burned fat and then it's gone. And now I'm like, oh, now it's in your blood. That sucks.
Well, the binders can help pull things out, and that's part of that program, which are these essentially substances like activated charcoal. When you take it, can bind onto toxins and pull them out of your digestion through digestion. But that is the feeling. And so you ask like my subjective experience and other people. The niacin protocol, a common experience is kind of like that. I don't want to say it's exactly like that, but that movie Limitless with Bradley Cooper.
Oh yeah.
Where it's like, it's all like all of a sudden you feel like online. It's this sense that you didn't even realize there were like layers of things blocking cognitive performance you didn't even know. Like, because how would you? You have no comparative structure to realize that there's another level that you can be reaching. And the feeling is like, oh, this is how I'm supposed to feel. That's kind of like the common sense you get at the end of that protocol, which is like, oh, these toxins have quietly been robbing me of some of my mood, some of my energy, some of my cognitive performance. So it's wild stuff.
No, it is, because it's almost like not until you really take off the blinders do you realize you're blind. It's kind of like that old, I forgot if it was Socrates or who was it, where they talk about, I think it was Plato's cave, where it's like they didn't realize they were in the cave and they're scared of the shadows, right? The whole time not realizing, it's like, oh no, it's our own shadows, right? And it's until you
Right.
step on, you're like, holy shit, we were in a cave. You know, it's like, I think it's probably that same kind of feeling of like, you finally get to step out and look at the world and be like, holy cow, like I have full cognitive performance. Like this feels completely
Mhm.
different. The other question I had though, in regards to like obviously using sweat and using the sauna, can you combine that with other things like chelation or any of these other like detoxification modalities as well? Or
Yeah, chelation I haven't done. People do talk about it quite a bit, and again, requires kind of supervision. I don't know about combining the niacin sauna protocol with that. I don't think that's advised. I think you could do those two
Mhm.
things separately, but I believe you can do sauna with chelation. Is that something you've done? That's actually something
No, I mean
I
it's
never
it's
got into.
something that I've looked into for like other people in my family, just kind of getting doing the chelation, just get rid of the heavy metals inside of the bodies, right? And
Yeah.
like different types of detoxification methods. Like I've always been interested in it myself, and obviously, you know, like my wife has like a detoxification kit too. But I always, I mean, I'm not gonna say like I don't know enough to like be like this is the way or whatever, but I kind of feel like the body's always smarter than all of us, and the body wants to sweat or the body
Mhm.
wants to excrete toxins in any which way, whether it's digestion, whether it's puking, like whatever. It's like when it knows something's bad, it just wants to find a way for us to just use
Fever.
that. Yeah, exactly, sweat it out, right? And
Yeah.
dude, yeah, so enlighten us on that. Tell us more about fever as well.
Let's see if I can find the quote, but I did a Hippocrates quote where he said, "Give me a fever and I can cure any disease." I think that was the line. Um, but yeah, that idea that a lot of people will feel um, illness coming on, and if it hasn't kicked in yet, like a sauna session could actually stave it off. So again, not medical advice, but sauna can certainly lower the amount of times. Can potentially. I have to be careful with YouTube. Sauna seems to be able to um, lower the amount of times you get sick, let's say, and get colds and flus and things like that. Again, not medical advice, but it seems to point that way. Let's just say, and so it's incredibly powerful and kind of lends to the idea that when you're sick, your body's actually just needs to detox essentially, and so
Yes.
it's if you stay on top of that, your frequency of getting sick goes down, which was certainly my experience. I went from maybe like 8, 9 times a year getting some sort of, congestion, cold, flu type thing, almost monthly, to really like only getting sick maybe like once in the last 4 years.
Wow.
And you also can kind of see it coming because you're like, oh, I wasn't doing the right protocols. And so I messed up. That's why that happened. It wasn't just out of the blue.
Oh,
So
that's
that's
interesting.
that's a cool component of it. It almost feels like, so like in Eastern health, they kind of view it as like building up a cushion. So it's like you're
Mhm.
building up your reserves, and they call that Jing. So it's like I think of it like if you're like a balloon above water. If you are like 8 feet above the water and you start going down, you have time to kind of get back up. But if like beforehand it was like you're like an inch above the water and then all of a sudden you're plunged into the water and you didn't see, and you're always like almost on the verge of getting sick. And so there is this weird, like you said, intuitive body sense that like how much space you have before your body might need to detox and be sick again.
That's
So it gets
interesting,
a
man.
little woo woo, but it's I
You
think it is
know,
a little woo woo.
I used to think things were woo woo, and I'm like, you know what? There's no place for that until I started reading about energy and how generational or not, well, yeah, generational trauma, different types of trauma can actually be stored energetically inside of the body, and how there's other releases to it. And I'm
Yeah.
like, okay, so wait a minute. Now you're telling me there's science behind it. You know, before it used to be, oh, this is just crazy. You guys are all nuts. And I'm like, but the same people that are telling me this are telling me to take some pills to get rid of like whatever ailments I may have, and are telling me, no, you don't want to run around and you should eat this high carby food, even though you got cancer. And obviously, this might, well, I don't want to get into that, but it's kind of like, let's just give you the worst possible diet ever, which is not really going to support good health in the long run, and will may not lead to acute issues, but chronically it's going to mess you up. But for some reason it seems like we accept that readily and we'll accept the pills, but when people talk about things that are a little bit alternate or alternative as far as healing kind of goes, we view it as something that's, oh no, it's crazy. I'm like, I don't say it's crazy anymore, because I'm like, there's a lot of truth there, right? And again, commonalities across different cultures. Sweating, very basic one, but again, just kind of proves that point.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. I mean, a lot of people who kind of go down this like more natural health path tend to become pretty conspiratorial, and
Hell
it's
yeah.
understandable, to some degree. Um, I don't think it's about painting anyone as good or bad, but I think it is honestly assessing like the incentive structures of different institutions and
Yeah.
realizing, the incentive structure of a hospital is to care for sick people.
Hmm.
And as an individual, your goal should be to maximize your own health and vitality through your own research, because no one's going to
Hmm.
come do that for you. So, I'm hoping, a simple book like this can help people with that. Other things in the space, um, it's just about becoming your own advocate, because I think that's a common misbelief that the system is designed to support your health when it's
Yeah.
not. And it's amazing for some things. If I break my leg and need to go to a hospital, I'll do that. But if I'm looking for, achieving my peak energy, minimizing my sickness, living a long, vital life, it's not going to come from that system.
No, not at all. And the thing is, I think they've kind of made it so that people view pills or, what your doctor gives you is the way to make sure that you're safe and you're taken care of. And whatever it is, like whether it was COVID, whatever, is out there, the best thing you could possibly do for yourself is take care of yourself.
Yeah.
It's like get sunlight, go walk around, be active, sweat. And it's kind of funny too that I remember back in the day where somebody had told me, "Oh man, if you ever feel sick, you know what you got to do, man? You just got to go to the treadmill, run for as long as you possibly can, but put on like 3 sweaters, put on, like the sauna suit that boxers would use." And I'm
Yeah.
like, "No shit." So like I would try that every now and again. It's true, it would make a massive difference. And there were times I'm not gonna say that I was completely good to go right after it, but I did feel like I'm like, okay, cool. Like I felt it's almost like a wave of just like vitality has washed over me and I got rid of a
Mhm.
whole bunch of gunk is kind of the way that I felt. So
Yeah.
it's interesting now that you're kind of putting these different pieces together to really solve this puzzle to a degree.
Yeah. Yeah. There's the kind of practical, like modern, like toxin chemical thing. And then there's also this kind of woo woo kind of thing that I think a lot of ancient cultures understood, where it's this sense of rebirth, almost like release and
Yeah,
letting go and being able to move to the next level kind of feeling. So it's interesting.
it is, man. And I think we're only gonna. I think I don't know. I kind of feel like humanity's really because I'll talk to a lot of doctors now, and they are talking about different modalities that they're actually starting to employ with like different clients and stuff. Where it's like, no, I get them to cold plunge. I'm like, you a doctor, an allopathic doctor, getting people to cold plunge? I'm like, that's kind of interesting. And I
Hmm.
think sauna is right there with it as well because a lot of people have been shedding light on this subject, and I think it's something that's going to become one of those modalities that should be put into practice if you want to see people heal. But one of the questions that I did have is, what are some of the most groundbreaking kind of studies that you've seen in regards to sweating and sauna use?
Yeah. So, I mean, sauna use in general, I'm sure a lot of people have seen sort of like Instagram reels or TikTok reels on all cause mortality going down. Essentially making a link between the more you sauna, the longer you live, the less risk of heart
Hmm.
attack, things like that. I focus more on the sweat side of it, which is the detoxification side. And so, the really eye-opening things for me were, really just those key kind of pillar points, which was toxins are worse than we thought they are. And
Hmm.
sweat is a preferential way to sweat these out. And there's studies showing that. And then you have these extreme examples of people like 9/11 victims using sauna for that reason and healing like crazy. I mean, I interviewed a woman, Anne Marie, who is an advocate. She goes to Washington to talk about this issue and trying to advocate for that protocol to be used for other purposes. And when she was exposed, her daughter wouldn't let her drop her off at work because at school, because she sounded like Darth Vader because of how like congested she was, and she was on
Oh,
pills and asthma inhalers and
killers,
things, and
yeah.
then went through the protocol. And when she went back to Washington before and after going through the protocol, they didn't believe she was the same woman because of how different her face looked, like the puffiness, the structure, her eyes. And so, I had conversations with a couple women who had gadolinium poisoning, which is a very toxic heavy metal from MRIs, because you get sometimes, depending on the type of MRI, you get gadolinium exposure and just neurological havoc on them. And so going through this protocol gave them relief where nothing else could. And so just kind of, it was really great that there were these extreme examples, but then bringing it back to, you don't need to have gadolinium poisoning. You still have a toxic load if you're a human being. And so that was kind of
Yeah.
an eye-opening component of talking to different toxin experts and, environmental medicine people, and just kind of being humbled by that. Oh, they got you. The planet is just we're just in a soup of this stuff, and fortunately we have this release valve that we can take advantage of. So just trying to paint the steps for people of how they can do that.
Yeah, because it's one of these things that I feel like you said earlier too. It's almost because of the fact that you can't. It's not like something acute, like somebody comes and throws battery acid at you. You know,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
unsuspecting. You'll be. I mean, for myself, just recently, I changed like my toothpaste just because I realized how bad it was with like the fluoride and all these other things that it had into it. So now we're using
Mm.
Private Life Organics, and it's different because it's got the charcoal and it remineralizes your teeth.
Yep.
I had never felt my teeth the way they feel now from using
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
product. And then that's kind of the biggest difference, right? Where it's like it's almost like you can't really talk about it as much as you can just tell somebody, go experience it. When you experience it, you come back and you let me know. And then you're kind of going to
Yeah.
be on that same vibration of like, dude, you feel it? Yeah, man, I feel it. But I don't really know how to explain it. I just feel like I'm
Mm.
like like $1,000,000, man. And it's one of these things that I think that because of the fact that we don't, there's no real way to quantify it, I guess. It's like a feeling thing. And I
Mhm.
feel that because of that, it like the mainstream or something, like again, going back to the whole woo side of things, I don't think it's woo woo, man. Like it's a feeling, it's a vibrational things. And people that deny the fact that we are energetic beings, I think I'm like, hey man, you got to understand that you are a human being. And from a holistic approach, right? It's mind, body, and soul, which
Mhm.
means, if your soul ain't right, your mind's not right, your body probably won't be functioning all that well. And
Yeah.
when you're constantly being bombarded from different things all around you, you're going to feel those changes. But the other thing that I had in regards to like toxicity, what about dirty electricity? How does that play into, obviously the toxic load that we have within us?
Yeah. So EMFs are kind of actually an issue for saunas. So if you're going to buy a sauna, I talk about this. It's an unregulated industry, and so for infrared saunas specifically, there are two things to look out for: toxic materials. I think we touched on that,
Yeah.
and low EMFs. And so you really want to make sure you. I'd say maybe we can link to that Facebook group so people can see the brands,
100%.
because
Yeah.
people get from a company and then they'll show them walking in with an EMF meter and it's going through the roof when the company said they're at low EMF. So it can make anyone cynical, but a group like that could be helpful to kind of know the brands that are reputable. So yeah, I mean, it's exposure across all these components, you know, and it adds up. The actual mechanism of, say, like radiation and sweat's kind of role in getting that out of the body is kind of murky and something I'm not as familiar with as specifically like physical, like chemicals.
Yeah.
But I do kind of lay out like a very simple equation, right? And so we're kind of touching on that between the toothpaste you're talking about and stuff like that, which is you want to maximize your detoxification, your ability to, you're essentially sweating and getting this stuff out of you, and you want to minimize your exposure. And so what are like the low hanging fruit for minimizing exposure? Turning your Wi-Fi off at night for when you
Yeah.
sleep. Like you just said, household products like putting a shower filter in. You're in a shower every single day. If you go to ewg.com and look up your zip code for your tap water, you're going to see what chemicals are in your water supply, and it might freak you out a little bit. But hopefully that encourages you to spend, $80 on a quality shower filter that you use every day. The water you drink, bottled glass spring water versus nanoplastics in plastic water bottles. Do these things add up? I think they do. I think you do, and I think a lot of people do. And so the issue, like you said, is it's subjective. But when you see a community of people becoming fanatical about something, there's a few ways to take it. It could be cultish, or maybe they're onto something, and it's worth experimenting and feeling into it. For me, that was following a few natural health people, looking at their videos and being like, I think they have more vitality than I do. I think their brain's functioning better than me. Their skin looks better. They seem happier. Maybe I should do what they're doing as a starting point and then iterate from there, but kind of take that leap of faith that maybe I should implement these things. Because the upside, like, what's the drawback is I spend a couple dollars more on some quality toothpaste. So I
Yeah.
don't have fluoride every single day. What's the potential upside? I feel better every day. Like it's a very clear, at least for me, it was a very clear decision. And so, I feel like sauna is the low hanging fruit to get people on that journey.
Yeah. And you know what the thing about the sauna too? It's like, bro, you can't tell me that going to the sauna is difficult. There's a lot of different things out there that when it comes to like eating healthy, where I tell people, I'm like, okay, man, you log your food. And I'm coaching people. I'm like, make sure you get your veggies, make sure you get your protein in, all this. That's a little bit more
Yeah.
complicated. But hopping into a sauna for 10, 15 minutes a day or whatever the protocol may be, I'm like, come
Yeah.
on, man. It feels great.
Yeah, you're just sitting there. I mean, it can get hot. Infrared saunas are easier to tolerate than dry. If you have your own sauna, I'll watch a movie through the screen. I'll throw a podcast on or YouTube videos. I make it easy. It's really just about getting that deep sweat for an extended period of time. And if you get tired, you can step out and drink some water and get back in. It's such an easy, fortunate thing that we have that people can implement. It's not asking them to do an hour HIIT class or something like that.
Yeah.
But doing it can get them on that upward cycle of, wow, my energy's up since I've been sauning 3 times a week. I think I'll do that yoga class or that exercise class. And it can get you on that kind of flywheel.
Yeah. And I mean, it's funny you mentioned the flywheel because it's kind of like as soon as that thing takes off, there's no stopping it. And then it's all of a sudden you realize these people they got tons of vitality. They look good. It looks like they feel good too in their own skin. They're comfortable. And it's almost like you look at them, you're like, I want what they have. How do I start developing that? You reach for the low hanging fruit. And obviously, as soon as it hits that flywheel, you realize it's not a cult. They're not crazy, and I think a lot of it does come down and people got to be a little bit open minded too. I think sometimes people will look at those groups and say, oh, it's a cult and just write it off completely. Where I'm like, no, if there's a whole bunch of people saying the same thing about whatever modalities that they're using, there's probably a nugget of truth there. But then when you immerse yourself in what they're doing, you're like, okay, there's a lot more truth in here than I initially thought. How do I go about getting what they got? And you obviously start discussing it, and you can take all that stuff and start applying it to your life, which I think is excellent because when you start talking to other like-minded people, it also kind of makes it so that you can discuss different ideas. Maybe some ideas might seem a little bit crazier than others, a little bit more woo-woo, but somebody had to discover that niacin and sauna combine pretty well.
Well, funny you should say that. So I think that's part of the reason. Well, first I'll say I think the quote is, a cult is just a culture with bad intentions.
Mm-hmm.
And so the idea is like the only difference between a cult and a culture is the culture is fanatical about something with positive intentions. So, there's a cult around spin classes, right? Maybe there's like a 1% negative, people like overdoing it or something like that. But all in all, it's a net positive thing.
Yeah.
So it's a good culture. The origins of when I was racking my brain, like, why is everyone not know about this niacin sauna thing? One of the reasons is one of the people that it's argued figured out that niacin and sauna detoxifies was actually L. Ron Hubbard, who started
Scientology?
Yeah.
What?
Yeah. And so it's like, I don't know how he stumbled into it. I hate the fact that it causes baby thrown out with the bathwater syndrome. So, when people have asked about that, I know nothing about that religion, very little. And it's kind of like you have to promise people if you take niacin and get in a sauna, it's not going to change your religion kind of thing. And so I think that's really tainted it. And so it's like, all right, cool. Props on that one front. There seems to be other issues with that whole thing, but let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater. Like there's amazing things that can happen from it's a vitamin and a sauna. It's not like this enormously complicated thing that someone came across,
No,
so
yeah, not at all.
Interesting.
That's kind of weird.
It's the first time I'm mentioning it. I chose not to touch on that in the book because I didn't think it helped to mention it. There were other people who had research around that area as well. I do think that that's really tainted how the public perceives it because it's just such a charged topic.
Well, I mean, sometimes the way I kind of see it is that most people, if their batting average sucks, right? Even Hitler can hit 1 out of 500. There's probably something that you could say like, okay, well, that was good. Everything else was pretty awful. But you can say that about any tyrant on this planet. Everybody's got something to bring to the table. And I mean, it's kind of unfortunate. It's like L. Ron Hubbard, really, man? The science fiction turned Scientology creator of all people, right? But I mean, I don't know. For me, I kind of see it as inconsequential. I'm like, is the data good? Then I'll take it. Is it actually going to help me in a positive way? Then I'll take it. And the truth of the matter is that it is. So, hey, screw it. L. Ron Hubbard came up with it, but maybe we should just attribute it to somebody else instead.
Yeah, and it's been iterated. Like the way he did it was way different than the way you do it today. They would do like 4-hour dry saunas, and it was mostly for drug detoxing.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
yeah, like he figured out that drug residue stores in the fat, I think, and that by sweating it out, the craving for those drugs diminishes. So a
Interesting.
little bit different than like chemical exposure, the modern toxin issue. Um, but yeah, I mean, if you follow like, I think if you buy into the beliefs that are laid out in the book, you kind of come to some weird, not mainstream conclusions. One being, okay, if this is all true, toxins are this bad, and sweat's the best way, and sauna is the best way to sweat, and infrared sauna is the best sauna, and niacin sauna takes it to another level. Every person on the planet should be going through a niacin sauna protocol. And if they did, I bet the research would show significantly lower levels of mental health issues, anxiety, depression, chronic fatigue, disease occurrences over that following 20, 30-year time horizon compared to a control group. And so that's one example of a study I would love to see is let's put 1,000 people through this, track them for 20 years, and see how that compares to an initial cohort, because all signs point to that it would just completely wipe the floor with not doing it. So yeah, some interesting stuff.
Well, I mean, if you can back it up by the fact that you went out, you did it, you felt those experiences, I'm pretty sure now you're pretty confident in the fact that it would wipe the floor with a lot of these other modalities that people bring to the table. And I'm kind of like, the way I see it too, I don't really like a lot of these detoxification programs that force you to like take more stuff to detoxify more stuff. I
Yeah.
kind of like the idea of a sauna or a fast where it's kind of like just gives your body time to breathe and just gives your time like a way to flush stuff out, I guess.
Yep. And fasting is, one of the most ancient practices as well. So they kind of, props to that as
Exactly.
well.
Yeah, no, I
Yeah.
mean, one of the first books I ever read about that was it's called Eat, Stop, Eat. And I'm like, that's kind of weird. What's this about? Right. So I started reading about fasting and it said the same thing. It's kind of a lot of cultures across this globe or across the world, have all believed that fasting over time will lead to, being more healthy. Obviously helps with weight loss and those other things as well. But more than anything, people did it for longevity purposes. Right. So
Mm.
if everybody's done it, then there's a pattern behind the fact that this probably works, right? And I think what we're going to see with the sauna is that it's probably going to become more prevalent in our culture. I think Joe Rogan's probably been one of the biggest guys to, push the sauna out there, which is awesome,
Mhm.
right? Because a lot of
Yeah.
people have been like, wait a minute, okay, there's probably some truth here, right? But I was going to ask you too, before I lost this train of thought, was what is the best sauna in your opinion? Like if you're going to have a household sauna, what would be the best like model to go with?
So the first thing is making sure it's low EMF and free of toxic materials. Um, I've only come across two brands based on that group, and the expert who I kind of rely on for information in terms of like sauna builds. This guy spent thousands of hours researching saunas and does it for a living. And he's only comfortable sharing two brands. People ask about portable saunas. I was almost going to start a company around this. There's not a single portable sauna that passes that sniff test that he would recommend. So those ones like on Amazon where you're like
I
your head's
saw
out of
those.
it or things like that,
Yeah.
they all don't pass that test. And he wants them to because then he can sell them to people, but like none of them do. So we almost talked about starting one. Um, I'll just say the two brands. So the two brands, the main one is Clearlight, which everyone has heard of, or is a big player in the space. And the other one is a small company that I actually got from Canada called Sunstream. And that's not Sunlight, and that's Sunstream. And those are the two brands. And then, there's kind of specifications for size, what you want, some, one person, two person, three-person saunas, cost, wood type, kind of a few variations. But first step is really making sure it's quality. And those two brands kind of allow you to take a deep breath and make sure you're not getting into a toxic box every single day.
Mm-hmm.
And then for public saunas, usually it's going to be dry saunas. That's on the infrared sauna side. And then dry saunas, it gets a little bit, typically it's like outdoor saunas and things like that, or you're installing them kind of like custom or things like that, from my understanding. So yeah, I mean, I think maybe we can link to that Facebook group for people to get more
Oh,
information.
100%, man.
Yeah. And I
And
lay it out in my book as well, but yeah.
okay, yeah, I figured as much. Because the reason
Yeah.
why I was bringing that up is that it's funny you mentioned that. I've been seeing that a lot on my feed lately, where it's just kind of like, oh, these saunas you can have at home, the NU wrap or whatever. And I remember initially, like I looked at some of them. You're right, the Amazon ones. I'm like, well, I don't know what kind of, if it's built with a bunch of like microplastics or what. It doesn't really look all that great. And obviously, I haven't really studied it, but that's kind of why I was asking you.
Yeah, I mean, if you think of, if you're in a hot car in the summer and you leave a plastic water bottle in there and you leave and you come back and you try and drink it, it's going to taste like plastic because toxins
Yeah.
migrate with heat. And so when you're in a hot box and you have glues or bamboos or flame retardants or things in the build that are leaking into the air with nowhere to go, you're just breathing that in, which is the exact opposite reason of why you're in there. And then the EMF issue, which is a little beyond my pay grade in terms of understanding how it works, but just making sure that you're not in a radiation box either, and it's low EMF. And so a lot of companies lie about that too. So, unintended negative consequences of this is making sure like what might happen that I'm not aware of. That's a big one. And then the other one is making sure you're supplementing properly because you do sweat out good stuff as well. So making sure you're drinking like glass bottled spring water, you're going to get some nice minerals from that helps to replenish elements like an electrolyte supplement, maybe some really nutrient dense foods like liver, organs, things like that, to just make sure you're covering your bases and you're not becoming deficient in anything. So those are kind of the two big categories to watch out for.
What about potassium? Just from like, sweating as well.
Huge issue. Yeah. So that's the guy I mentioned, Brett, who runs that Facebook group. He's actually studied that really in depth. And so he argues that potassium is one of the most overlooked deficiencies and also something very common with regular sauna use. So making sure you're getting adequate potassium, which is actually pretty hard to get from what I understand. So something I'll be looking more into as well.
Yeah. I mean, the reason why I say potassium is just that, it's always linked to like for bodybuilding or whatever, like cramping, right? So it's kind of like making sure the potassium's up. But it kind of makes sense if you're going to be in the sauna for that long, sweating all that stuff out, because it's something that not until you mentioned that I kind of completely overlooked that. But I'm guessing, yeah, you're right. You like sodium, I guess, as well. And then you mentioned Element, right? The electrolyte company.
Yeah, I haven't used it, but people seem to like that as an electrolyte option.
And probably better than Gatorade loaded with all that red and blue dye.
Yeah, much better than Gatorade. I used to live on that, but yeah.
Interesting. And then before we kind of end off here, you mentioned the niacin as kind of like, the last modality as far as saunas kind of go. But what would be a good way for somebody that's just getting into this to really, begin their sauna journey? Would just be like 5 minutes a day, 10 minutes a day. What would that like beginner protocol kind of look like?
Sure. Yeah, definitely don't just start using niacin. You should really know what you're doing with that and probably get a coach or be a part of an online community that guides you through it. I think the first step is not to plug myself, but what happens, everyone who's read this book, I'll get a message from I'm getting like it makes it so that you understand exactly why you want to be doing this and no motivation is required by the time you're done. So everyone's like, hey, I just signed up for this place and I know what I'm doing and here's how I'm going to start doing it. So this is the best sort of like a lead in to making sauna a regular part of your life. So definitely check that out. I think we'll have it show links. It's on Amazon, multiple formats.
100%. Yeah.
So get that, start there. And then, in terms of making it a part of your life, I do walk through kind of your options there, but really it's about making it doable. So you don't want to have to drive 2 hours to a sauna place, 3 times a week. So finding the nearest location or knowing how to buy your own sauna and how to make it a part of your routine so that it's something that's becomes automatic. And once you start and have kind of easy access, it does become something you kind of crave in a sort of that positive feedback loop way. So, you start small, 5 to 10 minutes, see what your body can handle. It's a marathon. So you start small. I talk about subtle little things like how to go into a sauna. You don't want to be wearing clothes. You don't want to be bringing in plastic water bottles. You just want to be wearing really just white cotton towels and be naked as much as possible. So I talk about how to actually do the sauna session, that protocol, and how to kind of stair step your way up to making it getting to like 40-minute sessions up to an hour. Gotcha. I typically do I'm aiming for kind of like minimum dose where it's like you're going to see life changes is 20 minutes of a really like heavy sweating 3 times a week. So sweating where like you sweat, you take a towel, you wipe, and within 2 seconds, new sweat emerges. You want like 20 minutes of that. So it's going to be like 1 or 2 towels just drenched in sweat as you're wiping yourself down. Yeah. And it can be exhausting. So, but you build like the gym, you build a tolerance to it.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Interesting. Oh man, there was something else that I was gonna ask. Yeah, this is just for, I guess, my own personal biases, but I was gonna ask, would you recommend it before the gym or after the gym, or would you just say both is okay?
After the gym for sure. Yeah, you're gonna be too tired to go. I don't know the research on before. There's interesting research on. I didn't go too deep into this because this is more like sauna benefit than sweat research.
Yeah.
But interesting research on like human growth hormone.
Yeah, testosterone.
How you dose the sauna sessions. Like if you do it 3 times a week versus 7 times a week, and you do like they've tested like if you do 10 minutes the first Monday, Wednesday, and then an hour on Friday, testing like your testosterone levels, your human growth hormone, your energy levels, and things like that. It has different effects. I don't know them offhand, but there's interesting research on that. But definitely a great post work. I do it post workout. I'll turn it on because I have one in my house. And then I'll walk to the gym. Then I'll come back and it'll be heated up for me, and then I'll hop in for 20.
Yeah, I'm guessing. But you got the tolerance built up, man.
Yeah.
But straight up, Justin, this was really, really enlightening, man. Because I think, like I said before, there's something that's overlooked and something that we need to, not just guys, girls as well. If you listen to this podcast, really get into it. And again, if you want to get the book, be sure to click the link in the description. I'll make sure everything's there. Definitely had a great time learning about all this stuff. So, Justin, thank you for coming on the show. And any closing words, man? Where else can we find you?
Thank you, CJ. Thanks for having me. I think so. We'll link the book. My email I can provide is justin@sweatthebook.com. I like to hear from people. So if anyone wants to reach out, my Twitter is Hey Justin Glaser, and then my Instagram is Justin Glaser7. So we'll just make sure to pop those in the bottom.
Perfect. I'll make sure it's all linked there, man. But no, this was awesome. And I hope that you guys at home, if you're watching, can take this stuff and apply it into your life. And it's simple, man. Just jump into that sauna. So until the next episode, we'll talk then. Be sure to check out geltogrow.com, where all masculine health solutions listeners get 30% off with the promo code MHS28. That is promo code MHS28. If you check out geltogrow.com, you can check out the balms, the ball stretchers, and coaching if that is what you're interested. So be sure to check it out to get your PE journey started the right way with the balms and all the other good things that they have. And of course, the coaching. But be sure to use the promo code MHS28. That is promo code MHS28 for 30% off.